up, we have a guest from the great province of Ontario, Canada. Um, um, Diyana Noory.
Hello? Hello? Is this working? Yes, it is. What an honor and a privilege it is to represent Ontario in New York. So, hi. Yes, I do have slides. They're on Google Slides. Well, I can give you my intro while he does that. So, I am a writer who has written things in Noisey and Vice. I did some music journalism. Currently, I am a policy analyst working with Canadian Heritage, which is like the arts and culture technology branch of the government in Canada. So I'm a policy analyst working on mainly music and AI files. So pretty interesting stuff. I'm a lawyer by training. I do events in Montreal, mainly like Swana, techno stuff, and an aspiring DJ. Et voila. So, sorry, one sec. I wonder if my notes aren't showing up because you have it open. Let me just make a copy for myself. Sorry about this. I'm just going to create a copy in my Google Drive and then, yeah. Yeah, but you can just leave the slides up. I'm going to just duplicate it in my Google Drive and then open it on my side. I'll save it.
I don't know some of you.
For me, my homie Michela sent me the call for submissions, and then she also, no, sorry, she texted me asking me for a review for all the dogs. And then I was like, you know what? I have more to say than just things about this album. So it became this monster. Sorry, it's taking a minute to duplicate this. I don't know if it's the best way to do this. You know what might be faster? If you close it, I'll screenshot my notes and swipe through the screenshots. Oh yeah, that works.
Oh, it's already there. So, these are your notes.
Yep. Great. Okay, awesome. And then, okay, cool. So then how do I switch the slides?
Well, then you have to have this one over here. All right, no, good.
Okay. So then when I want to switch, I just press the arrows. Okay. All right. So my little disclaimer before I get into this, I am about to dive into my personal experiences and enjoyment of a certain artist who is among the top of my list of problematic faves. So please don't take anything in this presentation as a way of dismissing his many personal issues. So now it's time for me to self-report. I love Drake. Um, year in and year out, despite my most valiant efforts and my erudite and eclectic taste in music. Doesn't matter. He's at the top of my Spotify list. It is what it is. I shudder to think about how many of his lyrics have been permanently branded in my mind in lieu of literally anything else. But I'm not that kind of Drake fan, you know, the one that's like quoting him unironically and I cape for him and I like idealize him as the epitome of personal success. And I think the same can be said for anyone in this room, like basic media literacy, you know? So that being said, I also wouldn't describe my interest in him as ironic. Like I genuinely am fascinated with his pop culture imagery. And I've never been one to kind of discredit an artist's impact on the basis of popularity. I was a One Direction stan in high school. Like I was humbled very quickly. Uh, and it's a tremendous achievement to build a musical catalog that can appeal to so many different kinds of people over the course of literally more than 15 years. So I've been following his career with delight for over half of my life, and that's a long time. And while his flow might get more sophisticated, his production more slick, his features more varied, there always remains the Drakeness of it all. So Drakeness is at the core of Drake's music. It's his Jekyll and Hyde duality, the certified lover boy and the dog coexisting in the same space. It could be when he goes all serious and reminds us he's got mob ties who will spin the block at his behest. And in the same breath, it could be him crooning a lamentation about how he's never treated well in relationships. It's his self-aware goofiness contrasted with his immaturity and egotism. It's the unstoppable force of his vulnerability meeting the immovable object of his pettiness and bravado. So being from Ontario, I have a special connection to Drake. He popularized calling Toronto the Six. I was going to include this tweet from Deezus Nice that was like, oh, God bless Drake. He's trying to like popularize calling Toronto the Six from like 2013. And here we are. People say that. I say it. So his music was omnipresent. It was blaring through just about every university party, car ride, shop, restaurant, or bar I ever set foot in. And he's the unifying force. I fuck with him. My family fucks with him. My homies, frat bros, and like your mom, maybe your mom likes him. He's everywhere. Last year, I finally saw Drake perform live in Montreal, and I was struck by the variety of people in the audience. Like there was no like one Drake fan demographic. Tens of thousands of people all getting so lit while they're all locked in on this one guy with his, you know, that. I just think Drake is so funny. Like I can't help but laugh every time I hear him say, I blow $500,000 on you hoes, I'm a feminist, you know? If you're gonna do misogyny, like make it funny. So good for him, but also bad for him. It's not good. So I remember the first time I heard a Drake song very vividly. It was summer 2009, and I was sitting on the deck in my parents' backyard in London, Ontario, listening to what was once the Toronto station Flow 93.5, which was Canada's first Black-owned music station. Not around anymore, but it was great. I found a lot of hip-hop music on there. And hearing Best I Ever Had that day was a visceral experience. The opening notes were like, shaking my bones, and the melodic chorus was instantly drilled into my brain. And I knew I was witnessing what was going to be pop culture history, especially because I was already a big fan of Lil Wayne and he was his protege. So I was very enthralled by the prospect of following this guy's career. And So Far Gone really rocked my world. Like that, I was so there for the whole like singer slash rapper thing that everyone was dunking on him for. I was like, that's cool. Yeah, I like that. And they just don't make R&B tracks like Sooner Than Later, Houston, Atlanta, Vegas, Brand New and Successful anymore. And Uptown was a goated Lil Wayne, Bun B, Drake moment. So it's weird to be at an age now where I can like look back at those shockwaves that came with discovering an artist that I thought sounded really cool, and how, I can recall those emotions so strongly while also feeling like it happened so long ago at this point. So, as evidenced by my tweets scattered throughout this presentation, I was once a very prolific poster. And I followed the fan site Word on Road, a bunch of music fans, journalists, industry workers. And So I was very tapped into every Drake conversation du jour, but I wouldn't say I am so much now. I can't tell you every nuance of the Kendrick beef, but I still, I keep abreast. Um, at the time, there were like endless crossovers with other pop artists that I loved, including his flirtations with Rihanna and Nicki, his collaborations in the YMCMB era, like Bedrock, Forever, and Money to Blow, I'm on One, and Fucking Problems, his tiny cameo along with Tinashe in Justin Bieber's Baby music video. He also wished Zayn a happy birthday. That was huge for me as a One Direction fan and a Zayn stan specifically. And of course, I survived the wave of fake, corny Drake quotes that accompanied the snapback and silly band era. So every time Drake dropped a record, I'd be sitting there like this. It would help define an era of my life. I remember listening to his second album, Take Care, at the Toronto Pearson Airport while my family was going to Florida for a Disney trip. And I was replaying like the hell out of Shot for Me, Crew Love, Practice. And the whole thing still slaps, honestly. It's my favorite Drake album. Nothing Was the Same came out while I was at my high school library, and I was just sitting there like laughing at all the memes, including the series by Tyler, the creator of like the album in different places. One of them is like him eating a sandwich and stuff. So he was also awesome to follow online. Sidebar, I soon collaborated with some friends on this jack-o'-lantern here, which there's a video of on my Twitter linked in the essay. And we had the song playing and everything, and that's Drake's face. It's really low resolution because I couldn't find a picture. I just had the video and I screenshotted for my Twitter. But I was like, yeah, maybe Drake will notice me if I put this on Twitter. It did not get any engagement. Once again, though, front to back bangers on that album. Own It and Worst Behavior back to back, God tier. Come Through and For This Thing, honorable mentions too. And the music video for Started From the Bottom included a skit of Drake putting in work at Shoppers Drug Mart, which is like a Canadian Walgreens. So it was very much like, wow, like I know that place. So Drake's 2015 to 2017 releases were the backdrop of my hypebeast era and the start of my university career. Context, the image on screen is a meme I made of my good friend Ricky, who was like a Rick Owens hypebeast influencer at the time. We met at a 2017 Toronto streetwear loft party where there was definitely a lot of Drake playing. So I thought it would be fun to include this image. So I heard those tracks, like I said, at those Toronto condo parties, house parties at Western University in London, Ontario, and of course, nonstop, my earbuds, driving in the car, what have you. What a Time to Be Alive delivered silly little songs that got me through the day and also had me turning up at nighttime, like Jumpman and Diamonds Dancing. And Views came out 2 days after I finished my final exams in first year. I remember I really needed that pick me up, so I was happy to hear it. And this album featured two of Drake's biggest hits, including Hotline Bling and One Dance. More Life gave us the wonderful melodies of Passion Fruit, Teenage Fever, and Blem, alongside another very Drakey anthem in the form of Fake Love. So Drake is a character full of contradictions that always has a finger on the pulse and stirs the pot at just the right time. He's simultaneously the jokester and the butt of the joke. With each release and meta-ironic move, Drake inspires a myriad of memes and cultural moments, and he knows what he's doing. Bit of what Alessandro was talking about with the cultural fracking stuff. There's a quote on screen with his Hotline Bling choreographer, Tanisha Scott, that cements this. She's just saying basically like he improvised all of those memeable moments and like knew that there was going to be gifs made of him after the fact. Around 2018, we were approaching nearly a decade of Drake dominating the charts, and that year proved to be no different. He dropped some mega hits, including God's Plan, Nonstop, Nice for What, including features on Migos' Walk It Talk It and Travis Scott's Sicko Mode, which were also just huge songs in their own respect. Scorpion was among the music I had downloaded on Spotify when I went to Kurdistan for the first time, where my family's from. And so picture this flock of goats passing by the car while Drake's going, Kiki, do you love me? Like, I was just listening to that, looking at this beautiful nature, in addition to the 1975's Notes on a Conditional Form. Okay, so yeah, also on that album, Peak to That's How You Feel, awesome back to back. 2019's Care Package, I could take it or leave it, wasn't as big for me, but I loved Girls Love Beyonce. Girls Want Girls and Way Too Sexy were the highlights of Certified Lover Boy, emblematic of the goofiness and vibrance presented by the album's cover, which was, you know, the baby mama emoji thing. The silliness continues in Drake's 2022 releases with 2 albums gracing us, much like back in 2015. This is a really good TikTok. Who's seen this one? No one? Okay, again, link is in the essay. It's just an animation. Anyways, honestly, never mind. A very Drakey title. Displayed experimentation in house music with the explosive pairing of Sticky and Massive back to back. And his collaborative record with 21 Savage, Her Loss, again, very Drakey title, cemented his yassified girly pop her status and spawned endless memes with that iconic opening line. I don't need to read it for you, you know it. Drake's most recent album, For All the Dogs, was released on the same day as his Toronto tour stop, which I was pretty salty because my siblings went without me. Like they just got tickets the day before. I was in Montreal, to be fair, but still, I would have gone. And he paid someone in the audience's tuition, which, again, I would have loved that, but it's fine. But anyways, whenever he shares new music, my sister Diyana and I love to send each other the quotes that are jumping out to us. And our mutual favorite on this one was, I swear to God, you think I'm Shakespeare. That's why you always want to play, right? As indicated by the title and the lyrics on screen, this album really shines a light on Drake's scummy side and childishness. Maybe his upcoming hiatus will encourage some introspection. Probably not. I don't think he's even going on hiatus. He's still doing stuff and being a menace. But yeah, this intro to Slime You Out, very paternalistic. A suggestion of starting a support group for people who dated his ex. That, whatever that is. So I'm a fan of being entertained by Drake, much like I'm a fan of like eating cake. It's not the best thing to do all the time, but you know, it's really good in the moment, whether that moment is a celebratory one or like just, you know, any old day. And I look back fondly on times like when the Raptors won the NBA Finals for the first time. And I wasn't in Toronto, I was in London, but it was crazy. Like people were flooding the streets. God's Plan was just blaring. I don't know who was playing it, but it was just playing everywhere. And I smiled to myself with appreciation for the unifying and euphoric power of music. To me, Drake encapsulates the essence of a pop star. And every year I find myself wondering what's next. So dialed the fuck in. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Few questions. The first one is I really like this 2013 tweet by Drake. I am media. Ha 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 ha. Um, Media theorist Marshall McLuhan has this, of course, famous sentence: "The medium is the message." If Drake is the media, then what is the message?
The message is I am media. Ha 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 ha. It's whatever he wants it to be. And I think specifically that is like, I am the best and I am an influential force and I represent my city. I put on for my city. I am who I am. I'm the woman. Women love me. Women hate me. Um, this like hyper individualism and inflated egotism, like I was saying before, is just, I guess, at the center of it all. It's really just the Drake featuring Drake show. So I think the message is just that, whatever he wants it to be in the moment. It could be that he decides he's doing a certain type of sound, or that he occupies a certain space in the cultural conversation, or that he should get more credit for what he's doing. So whatever bone he has to pick or thing he has to say.
As a person who's started from So Far Gone, you've probably witnessed an emotional evolution in the way that he describes his relationships. Do we think he's grown, or do we think he's regressed? What is like if you could draw the shape of his emotional path?
I feel like, the theory of, when people become famous at a certain age, they just freeze there. I feel like that very much applies for Drake. Because you look at him now and he's still like, he was hung up on Rihanna and he's talking about like a 25-year-old on his latest album. I'm like, dude, you're literally pushing 40. This is not okay. So I feel like he is still kind of digging into the same themes of, heartbreak and betrayal, but also like being the player. And like at his big age, that's not something you would expect. So I don't think he's really grown in that regard. Maybe he's grown in the sense of how he navigates the industry and his media training or whatever. But he's always been very much like a good, I guess, celebrity. Like he's handled himself in interviews in a way that's entertaining. He has his Degrassi acting background. So he does like skits, he does bits on Instagram, on Twitter, whatever. So yeah, I don't think emotionally speaking, he's really evolved much. It's just the way he's expressed it may have changed.
Last year we had Cash Honeys presenting Drake from a perspective of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, whereby he's been in the desert for a very long time, trying to find some kind of calling or sensei to help him and go out there and fight the evil forces and save the world.
The haters.
Yeah. Do you see any kind of exit from this state that he's in, or some kind of transformational event that can maybe push him out of his current state?
Like a relinquishing of his constant struggle against the cultural tides and all of that. I think the only way that could possibly happen is if his status in the culture changes, in the sense that he's not going to be this huge monolith and he's able to have a different story. I think right now he's like, this is what he is, and people perceive him the way they perceive him. He has been around for so long. He never stops. Every year there's something or many things. So he's kind of like locked into that, I think, where he's just going to keep, being Drake in that capacity and reacting to culture the way he does, trying to shape culture the way he does, tapping into newer artists and trying to be there while they come up, but also taking advantage of that kind of exposure to keep himself relevant. So I think that if he were not that person, then maybe it could be a different story. It could be talking about, literally anything else. Like if he has an ego death or something and he decides he's not.
Well, the question with this year's Sixposium is was this year the event? Was this year the ego death?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think so.
That was not enough.
That wasn't enough. Because what's he going to do differently now? Like, I think he's just going to keep it pushing. But what do I know? I've only been following him for 15 years and seeing his constant constantness, but it's possible it could be a big break. It was pretty humiliating, and there is a lot to kind of pick up the pieces of. However, I think at the same time, he still is so popular. Like there's still so many people who don't like care and like aren't having these conversations. They're just like, whatever, like Kendrick sucks or like whatever, like, you know, just kind of dismissing it all. So I feel like as long as he has that behind him, that like cultural push, he'll just keep doing what he's doing. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean the Super Bowl's coming up, so we'll see.
Big as the Super Bowl.
um Machiavelli in The Prince tells us that once you have your enemy like very close to the end, you should eradicate them. So we're gonna see if Kendrick read The Prince or not. Question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's interesting. It's definitely like an evolution from how he's released music in the past. It could be, I guess, also playing with the way that artists are releasing music now in the sense of like, you know, the anonymous, like two shell kind of model, like no one knows who they are, or like the masked dream streaming thing, like just kind of working within those bounds of like, oh, who's this mystery artist, or like kind of distancing himself, but also still like clinging to the image of Drake. There was also the idea of the AI generated stuff and how that's going to evolve. And I don't know if he's going to be one of those people that ends up using his voice in that way, but it is something I've thought about. Like, is that also how he's going to be working with his image and his sound and his brand? So yeah, I think just kind of a reflection of how music is being transmuted to us and how personas are being built writ large. Yeah. Oh. Wagwan Delilah. Well, I think he really wanted to know what was going on with Delilah. At first and foremost, like he cares about women and how they feel. So Wagwan Delilah was really him trying to get to the core of that. What was going on with her? How's she feeling? How's it going in the six? Because he's been away for so long, and only she can tell him. She's the plug. So I think that's a really good question. Thank you for that. It's funny because, like I said, I work at Canadian Heritage, and we talk about Drake a lot, in the sense that he's still, you know, very much claimed as Canadian. He's still got like a lot of influence in the Canadian economy, in Canadian conversations. He is much bigger than Canada now for sure, but there's something still very quintessentially Toronto about him. I think he still claims it. He still comes home. He's got like all of those like OVO. Recently, it was his birthday, and in Toronto, Dave's Hot Chicken was giving out free sandwiches. Actually, I don't know if that was everywhere or just in Toronto, but like he's making himself known. And his deep embroilment with the Toronto Raptors, like that's a very big cultural thing. So I believe he is still very much Canadian, specifically Toronto coded, but yeah, definitely much bigger than that too.
I have. Oh, go ahead.
They know that Drake's Canadian? That they know Drake is, or Justin Bieber? Maybe more so than Justin Bieber, but I feel like they often refer to him as like the guy from Toronto, and he talks about the six in his songs more than like Justin Bieber does in his songs. So maybe a casual listener of Justin Bieber, maybe they don't know that he's born in the same hospital as me, actually, in London, Ontario. Same as Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling. So that's my claim to fame. But yeah, so I think that they would be more likely to know about him because he talks about it so much than Justin Bieber.
So one thing that is also very, very interesting. So I have this essay called "In Praise of Gatekeeping," where I talk about Kendrick and sort of how he seems to perceive culture. Um, the gesture that Kendrick does in "Not Like Us" is very, very interesting. It is one where culture is made essential, meaning you need a specific essence, and that essence, as we see in the video, is physical presence, physical provenance from a place, i.e. Compton. And when he says you go to Atlanta, these are all physical places where you need to grow up, you need to be from in order to claim. What this sounds to me actually is a return to a sort of protectionist view on culture. This is very interesting because what do we hear from our politicians in America? It's a return to protectionist from an economic standpoint, right? The tariffs. And so Kendrick is taxing Drake and saying, you cannot come here and extract value, to use the Alessandro term of cultural fracking. And as much as our countries are becoming more nationalist, it may be that our cultures also are becoming more protective of who gets to claim being from Atlanta or being from LA and whatnot.
Or even a certain neighborhood of Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. And so in that sense, I think the era of the global artist is ending with the era of globalism in general. Yeah, I think that was a result from an age where globalism seemed like a potential politically, social culturally as well. And I think we're seeing with the rise of ethno-nationalism in Eastern Europe, to some extent with Brexit, to some extent with the rise of Trump here, I don't think those figures are going to be possible anymore, at least if we continue towards that path. We will want American-made cars, right? We're going to bring back the factories here. We're going to bring back the musicians also in America. So I think the logic of the economy also flows through the culture, or maybe the other way around. That's a good question to know which way it goes.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really good question. I've thought about this a lot in the sense of like, there hasn't really been somebody in hip hop, I think, that has blown up in the way that Drake has in a long time. And a lot of like, not just in hip hop, but in pop, a lot of artists, don't have as much longevity. There's the whole TikTok industrial complex. And over the past few years as well, like the younger generations that would be fans of these artists have become more media literate, have become more tapped into like, the structures of capitalism and how celebrity feeds into that and what it means to be a pop artist and kind of convey those messages and be what they are. Taylor Swift is somebody who I must admit I have been a hater of for a very long time. I was like, when she did the whole thing with Kanye, and like, I just never liked her music. So I just was waiting for her to fall off, and she never did. It's praying on her downfall for real, but like, I guess I'm not praying hard enough, or the six gods not listening or whatever. But like, yeah, the whole idea of like a super dedicated fan base, A, but also B, the broader population being super into their music, right? Like that's something they very much have in common. And is what gives them that staying power. They have the fans who are committed and they're there and they'll push their stuff. Drake, not so much in the same way of like a stand in the traditional sense. I feel like Taylor Swifties has more of that, but Drake fans are also doing the same thing, just not in the same way. Like they're not sitting there like K-pop fans and like refreshing the videos and getting him plays that way. They're just like authentically sitting there and like listening to his stuff at the gym and like everywhere all the time. So yeah, like the fact that she has been kind of dissected in a different way now is, I think, like I said, a reflection of how the cultural conversation has shifted broadly. Yeah. I think you can also speak on this, given you grew up in Canada. So to answer, I'll start, I guess. Yeah. So I was referencing when So Far Gone dropped, people were like, yeah, Drake's a pussy. Like look at him, he's singing. It was the same as everywhere else. It wasn't like, whoa, there's this rapper from Toronto. That's so cool. It was like, dude, you're embarrassing us. Like, if you look at the Justin Bieber comments, like when I was looking at the baby video, it was like, how many dislikes does this have? Who's here checking how many dislikes? It was kind of a similar attitude, I feel like, with Drake, where it was like, he was too pretty and he was too like soft, and that was not really a respectable thing. In terms of like the state of the hip hop scene, I don't think that there was anyone that was like super big from Canada. And that's like music in general from Canada. Like, you know, Justin Bieber came along around that time as well. Who else did we have before? Like Celine Dion. Like there's this like, you know, it wasn't a hip hop thing. And yeah, and I grew up in London, which is a very white city. So it wasn't like there was a scene there per se. If it was going to come from anywhere, it was going to be Toronto. So it makes sense that it unfolded the way that it did. But I don't think that there was an instant like respect for him on those grounds. And even then, like as he got bigger and maybe the hometown hero thing started to sink in a bit more, and you know, like I think especially when he started getting involved more with the Raptors, that got more people on board with him because there's already like this affinity for the rappers, and they're like, oh, he's putting them on, like he's helping them win and all this stuff. So that's something that earns you some cultural cash. Yeah, but there is also, you know, the side of he's claiming to be like from like a rougher part of Toronto or like whatever, and he's not. And that's, and you know, the whole like he's a light skin, like all of that and how that's perceived. So it's complicated, much like everything else about him. I think it's a bit of both, particularly if you look at how, like, remember when he started incorporating like dance hall elements into his music, like tropical house, you know, like, yeah. Uh-huh. I really do need a one dance. So like, yeah, he's been doing that. I think he's been experimenting. I don't know if he'll ever get to the like the ambient experimental like Apex Twin era Drake, but like at this point, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I feel like if you were to go and like into retirement for a little bit and come back with like a John Hopkins collab, I'd be like, yeah, that checks out. So yeah, I think he is intentional in the sense that he wants to evolve his sound and that he listens to a lot of things. He wants to be a lot of things, like you were saying, like, you know, he hears a new patois word, he's like, oh, how do I put that in my, you know, like and like his whole influence from like UK grime music. So it's been a journey with that. And there is definitely the formula of like the way his flow goes, I feel, and the idea of like a catchy hook, but that's pop music, right? So yeah.
One of the parts that actually didn't make it into the Dazed article about Drake is that part of his music is reflexive, meaning it is music about success, but a music that is formally concerned with its own success as well.
Yeah.
So it is like pure pop in that it seems crafted to work almost like an infinite mirror, which is very, very interesting. I think that plays into the whole kitsch element that I was mentioning earlier. So yeah, music about success concerned with its own success.
Oh.
Mm.
Sorry. Can you summarize again the core of the question there? Right. And what it means to be Memphis for real? Mm, yeah. 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 I mean, I guess there is the argument that his dad wasn't around for a lot of his life until recently. Um, but I also, it makes me think about like Houston, Atlanta, Vegas, and how Drake is so like tied to those cities and how he calls like Houston like his second home kind of thing, right? So, sorry. Yeah, yeah, he's definitely like very much a not bi-coastal, bi-country kind of guy. He's bi like one of the girls or whatever he said. So there is very much an element to Drake that is super American. Memphis, Atlanta, Houston, whatever. It's there. But at his core, he's from the six.
Thank you so much, Diyana. It was amazing.
Thank you.
All right.